Michael Jackson one is something that's a little bit unusual because it's something that's a little bit unusual at Cirque. Um, it's one of the biggest taboos is talking about the vulnerability that's in all of us. And for this project, we really wanted to, although it was a celebration, and we really wanted to honor the creative genius that Michael Jackson was, we also wanted to use all kinds of elements to bring more texture to the story that we wanted to tell. So really, I thought that this idea of vulnerability, even of death, this is a show called Cartillo that we've created a number of years ago, that actually the whole show, the through line of the show, is the funeral of a clown, and he is imagining his funerals. So all those themes, although sometimes a little bit more delicate, we really wanted to find a way to integrate those in the story that we were going to tell for Michael Jackson 1. And of course, I'm sure many of you have seen this talk from Mr. Robinson, about originality, but also about failing. And it's also something that I really wanted to explore while leading the team in this project and while starting discussions with Jamie King, who's the show director for this project. So it's all those kinds of elements that I would like to explore with you and share with you and see how actually those elements influence the creation of the show. And so one of the first questions I was asking myself is, what does it actually mean to be creative? And I find that for this particular project, we had to kind of take the manual of instruction, on how to be creative and to kind of eliminate that and push it aside and see what was left and how we could create something based on that. A few years ago, this is actually the first big top of Cirque. Back in the days. That was actually 1982. And what's interesting in that picture is that a few minutes after the picture was taken, it collapsed because there was a lot of rain and it's actually collapsed. So again, this notion of vulnerability, how can we weave into that and how can we exploit it? You probably also saw this amazing feat in 1978, Philippe Petit, who decided at the age of 14 years old that one day he had learned about these buildings, a World Trade Center that was about to be built, and at 14 years old he decided that he was going to link a tight wire between the two buildings, and he was going to cross the two buildings. And so he did many years later in 1978. And that was also some kind of an inspiration. How can we push the boundary? How can we do something that perhaps seemed to be invisible? So really all those elements, all those ingredients of exploration brings us zoom in on Michael Jackson and his spirit. And when we started to meet with the team, and certainly the first meeting that I had with Jamie King, it was an amazing advantage for us because Jamie had actually worked with Michael, he had danced with him, he had created for him. So we really had a first connection to the electricity of the performer. And we start to explore what could be the elements that we could use to create this show. How could we get inspired, of course, by his music, but what in his story and what he said could also be inspiration to create this show. And of course, again, this idea of originality was something really, really important, and we wanted to really explore that further. So I want to give a little bit of the context. So here we are at the end of 2012, and we're in a situation where there's a couple of shows of Cirque that, haven't worked the way that we wanted them to work. And now we're kind of breaking one of our first rules. We're doing a second show on the same theme, and usually we never do that. We do one show, we do O, we don't repeat O anywhere else. And suddenly we were taking the theme of Michael Jackson. We had already created a touring show, and now we were going to take that theme again and try to create something completely new, completely different. So there was some challenge on that. Also, this was my first assignment as a creative director on such a big project. So that was also something that was a bit of a challenge. So there was a lot of elements that were a challenge, and there were a lot of big questions on how we were going to actually pull it off. And later on, I hope I'll be able to share with you some of those elements of mindset and how it was an inspiration for all of us. So, of course, the cover of the album, Dangerous, and right away we saw an opportunity to translate the album, the design of the album, in the theater by really using the surface, basically the proscenium, as a projection surface and a projection mapping surface that we could really give different types of feelings throughout the show, different types of mood throughout the show. We also really wanted to explore this notion of media. Michael Jackson was one of the first artists to really understand the power of the video, the power of MTV, and to really push that. And we really wanted to take those elements and try to push them further. So we imagined a story that would honor, that would celebrate the creative genius of Michael Jackson. And that genius, we imagined that it was kind of encapsulated into those 4 objects that you all know of Michael Jackson. You're probably thinking of the glove, or the glasses, or the hat, or the shoes. So what we did is we gave magical properties to those objects. And those objects will give the opportunity, the pathway to 4 characters to actually transform from one opposite to another. Someone who's really scared might become really courageous. Someone who's really smarty pants and kind of really very, very rigid might suddenly become really playful. And so we really used those objects as a device that would give an opportunity to our imagined version of Michael Jackson to really confer, to give an energy, a force to each of those characters. And basically, it's their journey. They get to transform thanks to Michael Jackson and his music. So here is just a few designs that we worked on. This idea of transformation, of course, that we used a lot. So every time that a character in a scene would get to really, for example, here it's Shy, who gets to transform into someone really courageous, and she happens to become an amazing martial artist. So for that, it's really when she gets to get the glasses, and that's when she gets to transform. Of course, I've mentioned media, and we really wanted to play on this idea of paparazzis. So we had a number of reporters, paparazzis, that as well, when they get to enter into that world, they get to transform, and that's basically the setup. So we start the journey, and we imagine a wall of TV screens from all the eras where Michael Jackson was alive. And we, in those images, you have all kinds of footage of Michael Jackson in interviews, performing, but all those images seems to be a little bit off. They're slow motion, they're upside down, there's always something that's a little bit strange about them. And that's a little bit our metaphor to talk about how the media machine has somehow taken control of his image. And when our hero gets to steal the glove, because he's not supposed to do that, then he unleashes, as Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy, in The Wizard of Oz, he unleashes something that will pull him in a world that he doesn't understand, and he will have only his 3 other friends to find a way out of that world, with the help of Michael, of course. So different designs, for example, I was talking about the media machine. We've actually created a character. This was one of the first designs of that character that we called Mephisto. And it's a mix of all kinds of cameras and mics and screens. And when it gets close to you at first, you look beautiful in those screens, and you're really compelled, to get close. But then the lights and the images become a little bit more scary with time. So that was one of the designs that we used for that. We've played on the idea of the vortex. We've played on many ideas, and I'll show you a few. I'll browse through them quite quickly, but I'll show you a few images of the composition, how we've created some of those scenes and put them together, and just referring to how, when I'm saying that we really wanted to bring the proscenium alive and break that fourth wall that there was in the theater to really give an experience that was quite immersive. So even those side walls that you see as well were projection screens. So we were able to really give a sense that the audience was actually in the scene as opposed to just witnessing it. So lots of different images like this. And again, I would love to show you more, but my clicker kind of resists at times. Again, this is a scene, this is Beat It, where we really play with the notion of time being suspended and turned upside down. So that was a really fun scene to compose. You see a lot of characters who are dressed in white. We call them the MJ Warriors, and all their costumes were really inspired by the look of Michael. So we've kind of mashed different looks and put them together and made those kinds of reference to all those different looks. I was again talking about Mephisto, the towers, which is a very important set element that we use, and they were from the world of Mephisto, so we were inspired by wires and connectors, and that was one of the source of exploration for that. I mentioned that the paparazzis, when they get in that vortex, well, they get to transform because they get to morph with those TV screens, and they become that. The elements that are morph under them, and also it was a nice opportunity for us to play on the more futuristic elements that we could find sometimes in the videos of Michael. Different elements that we use, again, very early draft of some elements that we use in the show. I want to really jump. This, for example, we did our own version of the Smooth Criminals, but this time with the tabloids that they had inside of their costume. And in blacklight, then their costumes would change completely style, and they would reveal those really beautiful patterns, scary patterns. We played on shadows, really a lot of elements, and I could stand here and talk for hours of all the different designs. Of course, for Thriller, we imagined that those paparazzis turned tabloid junkies would transform even more and become kind of wolves. And that's, I'll show you one of the early, again, renderings when we were actually prototyping and testing some of those tools. Really inspired by Thriller, and we really took basically the costumes as they actually existed, but then we explored the idea of having electronic guts for all of them. So they're really in the audience, and they get really close from the audience. It's really fun and very immersive experience for them. So again, very early draft. I'll just jump right away because I think the mindset for this project was it felt really impossible. And I think that in many of the projects that we are involved in, sometimes it does feel impossible. And I really wanted to share that mindset because that's a mindset, that's really a sentence I really like from Philippe Petit, because for him, it felt impossible, and that was perfect because that meant that he needed to start working. So what did I learn? what did the team learn? This is my daughter a few years ago. She's 6 now. But the first thing I would say is, if you can, in the projects that you're working on, if you can program failure, it's an interesting notion. Normally, what we do at Cirque is, especially to prepare for some of the meetings with Guy Laliberté, our founder, is really to work a lot on and try to get as close as possible to a finished product. And we kind of did the opposite. We decided that we were actually going to program failure. We were going to present the work earlier and expose ourselves to most probably criticism, but try to learn from that criticism. So if you can, and here, you know, the first thing, that was actually our first day learning how to skate. And the first thing that we did is we learned how to fall. And that was really interesting because then it was really easier for her to do the other things while she realized that it was not a big deal to fall. So if you can, in your projects and what you're doing, if you can program failure, that's something really interesting. Words eat. We have this really big, scary moment in our creative process that's called the lion's den. At some point, when the show is getting ready, we have those 3 to 4 meetings where we actually show the work to Guy and to the entire creative team, and these are really high-pressure moments. But we thought, you know, Lion's Den was maybe for us, for the project we were working on, was maybe not the right word. It was not setting the right spirit. Maybe you have some of those processes in your own projects where perhaps the word could really go in the direction that you want to go. So we changed, actually, for the first time in the history of Cirque, the name of Lion's Den for Jams. We thought it was very connected to Michael, and very connected to the spirit of what we wanted for these special meetings of feedback. So whenever you can, look at your processes in terms of creative review and see if some of those words that or names that you've assigned to those processes are really enforcing and empowering what you're trying to do. Choreograph feedback, in a sense that, again, it's connected a little bit to the other elements, but it's really important to think about how you actually want to receive that feedback with your teams. I'm sure that whether it is with the clients or with other team members, and really we had an experience in the during the first jam that really was difficult in some ways because we realized that some of the team was not ready for some of the tough challenge that Guy was presenting us. And if we had taken the time to really choreograph how we actually wanted that feedback to happen, I think that's something that would have really empowered the project. And we learned for the other feedback as well. Whenever you can, don't ask for permission. We all work in organizations that are very often institutions where you do things a certain way, and we get in a groove. And it's very easy to forget that at times, I think it's really important to cultivate that mindset of not asking for permission and perhaps beg for forgiveness if something goes wrong afterwards. Dumb. That was my role as creative director on the show. That was my role. I had assigned myself that every day I would ask to the team at least one dumb, stupid question. And why is that? Because very often it would have a chain reaction. That question that seemed dumb would lead us to another element, and suddenly we would have like this really fun and fruitful idea. So whenever you can, you know, and these are, I think that's a lot of those learnings, they're not necessarily big discoveries, but it's very rare that we apply them in synergy. It's very rare that, and sometimes we forget about them. We take them for granted. So for me, that was something really important, to really ask a lot of dumb questions every day. And be aware as well, you know. I realized that very often maybe one member in the team would talk about the the legs, then another about the ears, another about maybe the tail, but everybody's talking about the elephant. But nobody's really realizing that. And whenever you can, as leaders, it's your role to try to really connect the dots, recognize that you're dealing with different belief systems, different ways of seeing the world, and that there's a great opportunity to connect all those elements together. About who and about what, at some point in the process, it was really intense, and I think although it was really obvious what the answer was, we were having some difficulties with some of the contents, we were kind of losing our ways a little bit, and then we realized through feedback that this show was about Michael Jackson. In how many projects do we, halfway, perhaps we have great ideas, but we forget what was the actual purpose of the project at the very beginning. What are you trying to really talk about? So whenever it's possible to go back to really review, what are we trying to say here? What is the profound meaning of the story that we're trying to tell? I think it's important to do that. And as I say, we were doing a show. I mean, the theme was Michael Jackson, and suddenly we lost the presence of Michael Jackson in the show. Thankfully, it was not too late to change course. Break rules, break your rules, but not your principles. Every time you can. That's something as well. I was referring to the institution. I was referring to not ask for permission. At times, it's really important to recognize what are the principles, but that rules are also made to be broken to create new breakthroughs. So that's something that we really, really cultivated a lot in the show and in the project. And of course, all that, I think that if we do all that in synergy, I think we can get closer to this idea of transcending and of signature. That beyond, whether it is a very generic theme or a very specific theme, how do people that we're trying to move feel a signature? Beyond, feel something that's profoundly unique, that they've lived something that's profoundly unique, even if we're talking about the story of an artist as known as Michael Jackson. Just a few words, because I realize that I don't have that much time for question. The future for us at Cirque du Soleil, and I think it's the future for all of us in some ways, we've all talked about story and of this importance to connect with our audience. And I really feel that the next frontier, the challenge that we have is how do we connect even more, involve even more, engage even more the audiences in the stories that we're telling. So probably that the future is not only in our own creative labs and production labs, but it will also be something that will be connected to people who are actually coming and seeing us. This sculpture of Andy Goldsworthy is in the backyard at Cirque du Soleil in Montreal. We've called the show One, but I really love this sculpture because it's a beautiful metaphor of the work that we all do. Nobody is doing it alone. But also what's special about this sculpture is that nothing is holding it other than its own force. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for what we do. Certainly it's something that we try to achieve in some ways on Michael Jackson 1. And once again, I'm really honored to be with you and share very quickly some elements of this show with you. Thank you very much. We have, I have a few images of the show, but I don't know if we have the time.
We have time probably for one or two more questions.
Yeah,
Yes.
one or two.
Wonderful.
I have one. Could you tell us which were the designers, costume, set, and lighting?
Yes. So costume was Aldi Goko, who worked with Michael Jackson, Prince, Lady Gaga, did a lot of things. So he was really, really wonderful and really connected to Michael's spirit. We wanted to have that. For set, we had François Séguin, who's an amazing artist based in Montreal, but what's interesting about him is that he really worked across genres, from cinema to theater to exhibition, so we did a lot of things, so that was great. And the third one, lighting, was David Finn from San Francisco, so not too far from here. Absolutely, worked on operas and ballets and all kinds of elements, but also, and it was fun in the show because lighting, I think we have so many light cues in that show, from laser to light to, and we don't get to play a lot with, fireworks and all those rock and roll tools. So on that show, we really had a lot of fun. Question, comments, complaints, even?
Hi, I had a chance to see the show a couple months ago and thought it was wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about recreating Michael Jackson dancing on stage with the Pepper's Ghost effect?
Well, we really wanted to capture something that's really important, especially for really like hardcore fans of Michael, that in some way he's not gone. So that was a little bit of the spirit and for that scene. So we really wanted to capture that, and we thought that the Pepper's Ghost then was a beautiful metaphor for that. It was not only a trick, it was not only a technology that we were going to use to represent, but we were going to tell the story of how Michael basically is, the spirit of his music is in all of us in some ways. And when you see the dancers going through him and he dematerialize and materialize again, that was a little bit of the metaphor that we had for that scene.
Did you use existing video of him, or is that CG?
There's a bit of a cloak of mystery around that that I can't really talk about.
He signed an NDA.
I should have put that as well, like leave mystery on what you do. Yeah.
There's time for one last quick question,
Yep.
but it'd have to be pretty quick.
Hi. I was wondering, you talked about a lot about, I'm right over here.
Okay.
About originality and the value of creating something completely unique. And I was wondering, how do you retain that originality when you're working with a really well-known IP like Michael Jackson? How do you make it your own?
I think that it's, in short, Michael Jackson, in reality, was a very original artist. And I think that once we really connected to those elements and tried to really celebrate, as I said, that creative genius, we believe that we all have a creative genius in all of us. And sometimes we're more connected, sometimes we're less connected to that genius. But certainly, we really wanted to celebrate that aspect, and once we did that, I think the originality in some ways was just natural.
Thank you, Welby.
Thank you.
Just to let you know that he had originally asked us to provide him with a trapeze for this presentation. I see exactly where you were going to use it too when you got to the transcending slide, right? We'd like to take a minute to thank all of the sponsors. What we do here at the TEA this weekend and throughout the year.